Hello, I'm Hilary Robertson. Welcome to episode 15 of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by pianist, composer and podcaster Chad Lawson from his home in America.
Hello, hello.
Hello Chad, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, well, you too, thank you.
Great.
I love your piano. It
Thank
just
you.
looks beautiful.
It's fun. I wish I could play it more.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Everyone has this idea of professional musicians and how we just spend like hours a day here. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Most of our time is consumed with the keyboard as far as the computer is concerned. And so social media and creating content and for video and amazing interviews like this. So it's funny.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about most today was, well, first of all, let me do an introduction.
Sure.
Chad Lawson, you have this new album that came out during lockdown.
Mm.
Not that we're really out of lockdown yet, but earlier on. And it's simply stunning. It's your first album for Decca.
It is. Yes, ma'am.
And it's got this beautiful real piano, hasn't it?
Yes. Yes, that's a Steinway B, and we actually recorded the album at Abbey Road, and so that was really important for me. As far as honestly, it was important for me, but it was also a litmus test to Decca, because when we started talking about creating the album, they said, "Okay, so where would you like to do this?" And I said, "Oh, I don't care where we do it, as long as it's Abbey Road." And it was and it was almost to see if they could just make it happen, to be honest, because when we had such little time to actually record. So once we finally inked the deal, I think that was, I want to say mid-October, maybe late October, and they needed the album by early December. And so they came back and they said, we called Abbey Road, and the only dates that are available are over Thanksgiving weekend, or a date too late in December. And I think that they were kind of anticipating my saying, well, it's Thanksgiving, I can't give up that. And my wife looked at me and she said, it's Abbey Road, you have to go. And so we recorded the album in 2 days over Thanksgiving weekend. So while my family here in the States, they were having turkey and stuffing, I was having fish and chips and a pint. And I have to be honest, don't tell anyone, that was by far probably my favorite Thanksgiving I've ever had.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Isn't Abbey Road a wonderful place? Obviously, it's iconic, but it's more than that, isn't it? They have the sound systems and all of the kit and all of the stuff, as well as the history. It's not just, this is a historic place, let's do it here. I can imagine it's actually what they've got.
It was almost it was breathtaking, overwhelming, and inspiring all together. And it was twofold. It's because I had not heard of a solo piano album in this genre, in this style, being recorded there before, and so I wanted to just simply take advantage and try it out. And then also for those people that maybe aren't familiar with this style of music, my wife she doesn't listen to music. I mean, we listened primarily to NPR talk radio here 24/7. And so she's not really musically inclined, but she's heard of Abbey Road. And so that was the other part of the conversation, is if you're not familiar with this genre, this style of music, you're fairly certainly familiar with Abbey Road. And so it's a great conversation piece as well. But being in that room was just, I've recorded all of my albums in my own studio, the studio that you see right here in this Zoom call. And it was really important for me, as being an independent artist for so long, if I'm going to partner with someone, I want to get out of my comfort zone. I wanted to get out of my element that I'm so used to. And that was obviously the case with Abbey Road, which is like, I need to step it up personally. And that was one of the parts of doing so.
Right. So you talk about genre. How would you classify your genre of music? I hate putting, by the way, I
No,
hate
it's
putting music in a
important.
box, but it is.
It's very important, and I'm not one of those people that fight against this, because it personally it's quiet music, right? It's like it's music that is meant to, I always say, impact the heart, not impress the mind, and what I the reason why I bring that into the picture is because that can be any style of music. That could be, for some people, that could be Adele, right? But for this is just quiet instrumental music. And so there's the camp that says, well, this isn't classical. And then there's the other camp that says, well, this is classical. And I think what we're seeing is almost a generational thing. A couple of years ago, I did this album called the Chopin Variations. And it's basically where I took Chopin works and rearranged them for what I have nicknamed the Spotify generation. So you have this young audience, you have this young generation that potentially had never heard of Chopin before, or even classical music to begin with. And so my approach was, if Chopin were releasing an album today, what would it sound like? And so I had two colleagues of mine, they joined me. She plays violin with Lady Gaga, and he plays cello with everyone from Philip Glass to Snoop Dogg, right? So he's very like all over the place. And so we created this album of Chopin reworks. And basically the thought process is, let's introduce classical music to people that have never heard it before. And then the response was mind-blowing. The response was, I've never listened to Chopin before, and now I'm really curious. I actually want to go back and hear his original pieces, right? And so I think with that younger audience, with that Spotify audience, I think you can play my new album or like instrumental quiet music, and you can say, hey, that's classical music. You're aware of this? And I think the response is going to be, so?
Yeah.
It's just like to them it doesn't matter, because for them it's just something nice to listen to. If I look at I'm a very analytical person as far as work is concerned, as far as business is concerned. And if you look at my numbers, the stats during the week, Monday through Thursday, my music is way high as far as how it's streamed. Now come Friday, it drops like a rock, because no one wants to listen to this on the weekend, because everyone's letting their hair out, they're enjoying themselves, hopefully 6 feet apart. But then come Sunday evening, those numbers go back up again. And so I started thinking about this. I'm like, why is this the case? Why is this the demographic? And it's because predominantly it's younger people that are studying, that are reading, that want something on in the background that's not distracting them, that's not pulling from what they're focusing on. And a couple of years ago, there was an article in the Rolling Stone, and I think the gentleman was trying to get my goat, and he says, does it bother you that people call it sleepy music? And I said, no, not at all. Actually, quite the opposite. Because we have to have that balance. We have to have that music that we can let down our hair on the weekends. And then we have to have that music to where we can just say, I'm going to catch your breath, So it's important. It's important to have that balance.
And I think one of the reasons it's important and you think it's important is because of the whole mental health issues. And there was a link, wasn't there, when you launched the album to, was it Mental Health Awareness Month or something?
Exactly. Correct. Yes, ma'am. Yes. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not getting an email or a message on Instagram or what have you, especially this year particularly, where someone doesn't say, you are helping me through the most anxious time of my life right now. Like I used to get those emails quite often, but this year especially so, to where there was a woman that wrote me the other day, and she said, the pacing of your song flows in tandem with the pacing of my husband as I watched him take his last few breaths. And if that just doesn't like rip your heart out, right? And so like when I started getting those emails, I have chills right now. That's when I realized it's not about Chad Lawson. It's not about what I play. You know, it's not about my name trying to be anywhere. I I would prefer to be behind the scenes as it is. I'm not a spotlight person. But at that point, once I started receiving those emails, I realized that this music that I'm doing, it's more for the listener than it is for me. And that's something that I don't take for granted. And that's why I really started studying the science between music and mental health. Like actually what physically happens to our minds, to our hormones, to our bodies when we're listening to calm music. And so it's been really fascinating to learn it. But then I also have to keep in mind, because I have a jazz background, and so with jazz you can lean to it being rather scholastic, heady, sophisticated. And so I'm always trying to make sure that that's not the case. You know, your interview with Maria Schneider, she's a genius. She's unbelievable.
Isn't she?
Oh my word, how much I would love to be like her. And so, but going back to the conversation of everything needs to be a balance, she has that, she has that balance. And so we're all trying to find that place where we can reach out to people, where our music is connecting to the hearts of people, again, impacting the heart, not impressing the mind. And that's how I look at this instrument of, 88 atrocities before me every day.
Yeah. One of the things I find fascinating about music, I grew up as a child. My parents are not musical, but they were aware of music and interested in music, and they used to take me to concerts all the time. The Royal Albert Hall I went to, as a very small child.
So good.
One of my earliest memories of music, let alone classical music or anything, was hearing Tchaikovsky's 1812 in the Royal Albert Hall, and they had, they weren't real cannons up in the balcony, but that's what it sounded like. So they obviously had the percussionists up there. It blew me away, almost literally blew me away. And it was at that point that I realized that music was, and it had that ability to move you in so many different ways. And I think that's what's nice about your music, is you can listen to different things at different times, and you don't want to listen to the same things all the time.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think that's tremendous. I mean, that you have that memory, right? And so like we all have like that moment. Like I'll never forget, the whole reason why I started music is because there used to be a television show back in the day of a band called Shana Na, and it was like a doo-wop band, and they had a TV show. And so my parents weren't musically inclined either, and so we used to watch this show every week. And the guy was just like up there, like doing something on the piano. I didn't even know what a piano was, but he was having the time of his life. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I was 5. That was 40 years ago. And so it's amazing how we both have that memory, that very first sentence of what music does, and how powerful not only it is to listen to, but also just physically experience,
Yes.
That's tremendous. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you know Mark Wade, by the way, the bass player? I interviewed him 3 or 4 episodes ago. He's got a new album out in which he just plays the bass, in various different.
So cool.
And he uses it for percussion, and bows it and plucks it and everything, and it's just stunning. And his music, he's so in touch with the different ways, the different sounds, and the different ways he can use one instrument, and it feels like you have the same.
I'm trying to create different palettes. So we have 88 keys, and I only have 10 fingers, and so I'm constantly trying to create like an orchestra out of this. And also I'm always just really curious about, I love trying to reach the younger audiences, especially with this quote unquote classical, neoclassical, what have it. I noticed a couple of years ago, I was touring through Europe, and a lot of the festivals I was playing on, they were mixed festivals. So it wasn't just classical. You know, you would have pop and rock and hip hop and what have you. And one thing that really struck me is how few pianos I saw on stage. And what really surprised me is how many iPads I began to see on stage. And so I got really curious about that. And so I wanted to see if I could create an album using the piano, but running it through an iPad. Because the younger audience, I think sometimes if they see someone walk out on stage and play the most ridiculous thing on the piano, I mean, just like mind-blowing, astounding, I think that they probably look at it and they say, wow, that's incredibly impressive. I could never do that. I'm not even going to attempt. And so my mindset was, okay, what can I do to engage them with something that they already know that would create interest? And so that was where the idea of using an iPad came through. And so I did an album a couple of years ago called Re-Piano, which is re as in repeating piano. And so that album, everything you hear on there is strictly a piano running through an iPad. And I'm creating with various effects. And the interesting thing is I actually have a dehumidifier in my studio and it makes a noise. And I was like, oh, I should microphone that and run it through. And I was like, no, I want to use just a piano. And so when I was touring with that album, it was great because I had the iPad set up to where the audience could see it. And there's a video on my website, chadlawson.com, of me doing this because I wanted them to see me interact with the piano and the iPad. Because if you walk out on stage with an iPad, then you've already piqued their interest. We're like, wait, I have an iPad. I make music on the iPad. What is he going to do? And so you're instantly drawing their curiosity into this and showing them that, hey, the piano isn't just a dusty thing that's holding up picture frames in a corner that you haven't been to in your house for, your mom's house for quite some time. And the response was really overwhelming. The response was really tremendous. And so I think for me personally, I just always have that mindset of like, how can I connect music to people that may not be in this lane, as far as just what they're listening to. And with this new album, You Finally Knew, it's really been, that has really been the case, because I think with this album, what I wanted to do is I wanted to really emphasize melody. I feel like over the last couple of years, we really have not heard much melody in this neoclassical world, right? So I didn't want to use felt. I didn't, as much as I wanted to, I didn't want to bring strings in. I wanted it to be just simple, melodic piano. And that, for me personally, that was where my heart is. I'm a melody person. Melody is the most important thing to me in any song, because that's the songbird, it's the lyric, it's the, it's what you sing to yourself when you're washing dishes or walking down the sidewalk. And so that really was the emphasis with this album, was just melody. And it's been really fun to hear from the feedback from the listeners, because when you, it's not only been fun to record and play, but it's also just been fun to see people share it. Be like, oh my word, this melody is just gorgeous. And I'm humbled by that, but I'm more excited about them being excited about the melody. So this album has been really, it's a very important album to me. And I'm really grateful to partner with them, with Decca, for this release, because they completely saw the vision that I had with it. And they just totally gave me carte blanche with it. And I couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic. And actually thinking about melody, that's what gives us earworms, isn't it?
Yes, I love that word.
I love earworms. I get them. My go-to in the morning when I'm sort of getting ready to start my day, I listen to the UK's Jazz FM. Because that's they've always got interesting stuff. They'll have Sarah Vaughan and Miles Davis, and then they'll have somebody brand new right alongside them. And I love the variety. But there's always something that then becomes my earworm for the day. And as I go out into the world, that melody will be sitting in my ears until, either come home or I put something else on. But I love the concept of earworms. And I think that's exactly what you were saying about melody.
Yes.
Those great, I mean, I'm thinking of the earworms that I've had, Stevie Wonder or Earth, Wind and Fire or Miles, or, those tunes.
Right.
Just sit there, don't they?
They do, and then that's what makes such a great song. And not to go back on this, but that's what I feel like I've kind of missed a little bit in the last couple of years. I feel like a lot of the what I've been hearing is just which is lovely. It's fine in the background, but it's like, I want to hear a melody. I want to hear something that's lyrical. And so that really was the idea with this album.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about lockdown? And, you can't talk about 2020 without talking about COVID. And, so how has that affected you sort of personally and musically?
Yeah, my family and I, we've taken it very strictly, to be honest. My wife and I, we have 2 young boys. Both of my parents are high risk. And so we've taken it incredibly serious and strict quarantine. So we haven't seen anyone as far as friends. We haven't gone out to any restaurants. We haven't, it's been quite changing, to be honest. We've pulled our kids from their school because they went back to school. So it's been definitely a significant change. I've tried to look at it. I'm a blue sky kind of guy. I try to find the blue sky in everything. I'm supposed to be everywhere from Tokyo to Toronto right now,
Sure.
Touring with this album. And so what I decided to do was take the word isolation and replace it with introspection. What do I want to be when all of this is done? And I know it sounds in a roundabout way kind of cliche and kind of hokey, but I've really been serious about it. I'm just saying, what are the things that I used to give my attention to prior to COVID that when all of this passes, that I'm going to leave on the side? There are things that I've added to my daily routine, such as yoga and just, I'm a big runner. I've always been big into meditation as far as transcendental meditation. But what other elements am I going to bring into my life that I think are positive? And then what are the ones I'm going to leave behind? Now, as far as musically speaking, the difficult thing is not being able to connect with an audience, right? And so I could either look at it in a negative way, or I could say, okay, how can I turn this around and make this an advantage, not only for myself, but for the audience as well? And that's where the idea of the podcast came in, because I was receiving so many messages of people going through such difficult times right now that I said, I want to go further with this. I want to create something that's going to get deeper with them as far as just the grit of life with these people. And so that was the premise of the podcast that I created called Calm It Down. And it's really just meant to 15 minutes to just calm down the mind, and just either guided meditation or techniques or tips that I've been studying over the years. I really wanted to bring that element where people are they have such struggle right now. And if there's any way that I can tap into that and help, even just the least, that was the role that I decided to take. And I think it's tremendous in the sense of, had I been traveling, I would not be able to reach out to those people this way. And so I think that's really interesting for me personally. I'm just saying, you know what? For me, this is actually a wonderful thing that's happened. Obviously, there's, you have to look at it in various lights. But had I been traveling, I would not have created something that might help other people. September is Suicide Awareness Month. And so a couple episodes ago, it was Suicide Prevention Awareness. And the number of people that reached out, one person, I'm about to bawl right now, one person reached out and said, today is my 13th year anniversary to the date that they attempted. And it was just like, the fact that I listened to you as a fan, and that you're bringing this conversation to the public, that you're trying to make an awareness of this. He's like, he's like, I'm at a loss for words. He's like, I don't know what to say, but thank you. And so yes, it sucks not to be performing live, and I love to travel. But in lieu of all of that, if I can create something that reaches into the lives of others emotionally and help them through struggles and through what they're going through right now, it's all worth it to me. It honestly is.
That's lovely. And I think what's coming to me now is when I spoke to Maria Schneider and her activism in terms of, let's take a look at how the digital world impacts on us and how that sits alongside the natural world. And that double album of hers, Data Lords, is just incredible.
Right. Yeah.
I keep going back to it and listening to different tracks. And as I was saying about listening to things at different times, when I listen to some of the tracks now, I have a different response to it.
Sure.
And I find that fascinating for a start. But also, I love the fact that perhaps Maria wouldn't have had the time to put into everything if the world had been carried on with the busyness that everything is carried on. She certainly wouldn't have had the time to talk to me for my little podcast. No, but the reality is that there's a lot of musicians who are sitting around who have the time now to actually connect in a different way because they're not sitting in airports for 4 hours, unable to do anything else, or
Right. And I hope that's something that we all take away from this. It's just like you're seeing the increase of people, doing yoga, doing exercise, trying to take more awareness of their mental health. I hope that when all this passes, that they don't look at this and say, oh, well, that was just during times of stress. That was just during the lockdown. I really hope that they say, listening to this music really made them feel good and really calmed their mind and their nerves. And that they don't just leave it with the pandemic, to be honest. And I hope that's the case. I hope that, we all have that time of reflection, that time of introspection, of just saying, you know what, I didn't really need to do X, Y, and Z to begin with. And so I'm not going to continue it. So I hope.
Well, I think there are those of us who hope that the world will be a better place as we come out of it.
Yeah.
In terms of, apart from anything else, our environmental awareness as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the big things. Certainly in the UK, there's a much more of a feeling that this is part of the cause of this came from the way we treat our environment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And part of the benefits, I mean, we've all been aware of how fantastic it is to be able to take a walk in the countryside and not have aeroplanes going up all the time.
Exactly.
So it's about finding the positives, isn't it?
It is. It honestly is. And that's the thing is you can train your mind, as far as to get analytical here. Your mind is an exercise. And so whatever you feed it, that's what it's going to grow into. And so I'm trying to look at everything with, a positive way of looking at it. I'm not saying not realistic, but at least employing the idea of there being a benefit of something somewhere. So.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I think that's a very good place for us to finish. And I'm so grateful. It's been really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for sparing the time. I have enjoyed in the past listening. I've listened to your podcast a couple of times. And
thanks.
I've really enjoyed listening to your music and listening to it in more depth, actually, recently, which has been nice.
I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Brilliant.
Okay, well, thank you so much again. Hopefully you'll come to London and I can come and see you play in person.
You know what? Even if I have to sit on the sidewalk and play for you, I'll do just that. I'll be more happy than that. So
fabulous. Thank you.
Hilary, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chad.
Take care.
Okay. And you. Bye. Listening back to that conversation a few days later, I'm still inspired by some of the things that Chad was saying. The fact that he was trying to replace isolation with introspection. And if you have a chance to listen to his podcast, Calm It Down, then please do. It's absolutely fascinating. And what it has behind all of the words that are so meaningful, there's actually his beautiful piano playing. And it was lovely when we were having that conversation just now to hear his piano. He was sitting right on the piano stool, and to hear him just playing it was beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I have some really, really great interviews lined up. It is truly a surprise to me that I'm managing to speak to these world-class musicians and people with great ideas around music and the benefits it can bring to people. And a lot of the conversations have been around mental health as well, which has been really, really interesting. And I am so fortunate, and as Chad was saying about finding the positives, I think that's one of the positives for me of lockdown, is that I've been able to speak to people around the world who make fantastic music. So I hope you're enjoying Harmonious World, and I hope you will be able to join me for a future episode. Please do subscribe. And also, if you could leave me a review, that would be great. Partly so that I can improve, but also so that more people can find Harmonious World. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.